For centuries, we've kind of just been told that to achieve spiritual enlightenment, you have to, well, deny your physical desires.
Right, you have to, like, strip away the noise, all the worldly pleasures.
Yeah, exactly. You give up the rich food, the messy relationships, and you just sort of climb toward this completely silent, pristine, perfectly empty peak.
Which is the classic ascetic ideal, yeah.
But what if that entire paradigm is actually totally backward? What if suppressing your primal urges isn't the path to enlightenment at all, but is actually like a form of spiritual suicide?
It's a huge claim. I mean, it completely upends the ascetic ideal we've inherited from so many different traditions.
No.
Because the assumption has always been that to become more spiritual, you basically have to become less physical,
Right?
less attached.
Like it's a subtraction game.
Exactly.
We
We've
can,
idealized this subtraction game, but the perspective we're examining today demands the exact opposite. It frames the physical sensory world not as an obstacle to overcome, but as the ultimate divine manifestation.
and that is exactly the friction we're exploring in today's deep dive.
Mm.
We're unpacking a highly provocative, really passionate 2012 essay by the writer Rifeng.
Translated by Jing, right?
Yes, translated by Zhejiang. And the title of the essay is Emotion, Love, Sex, Beauty, and the Way of Nature.
It's quite a title.
It really is. And because this text pushes so heavily against the grain of, traditional spirituality, we are also bringing in this crucial supplementary commentary by a figure known as Fan Celestial.
Which is really helpful because that commentary provides the mechanics for how to actually apply this wild philosophy.
Yeah, it grounds it. So our mission today is to explore this radically life-affirming worldview. We're going to examine the author's argument that embracing our primal drives is, well, the only way to genuinely align with the universe.
Right.
So if you've ever felt a tension between wanting to grow spiritually and, just wanted to deeply enjoy the physical pleasures of life, this deep dive is going to force you to rethink the foundational rules of what it means to be awakened.
To really understand the author's argument here, we have to start with his underlying ontology, like how he actually defines the fabric of reality itself.
Okay, let's unpack this. How does he define it?
Well, he builds this entire philosophy on what he calls the way of nature, and he equates that to the ultimate generative force of the universe, or the way of the greatest creator.
But he doesn't describe this force using, like, abstract mathematics or detached physics, right?
No, not at all. He argues that the universe is constructed entirely upon four highly sensory, totally vibrant pillars, and those are emotion, love, sex, and beauty, which he also refers to as color.
And he is very deliberate in how he defines these terms. I mean, he isn't talking about human psychology in a vacuum here.
Right, he's mapping these concepts directly onto the physical movements of the natural world.
Yeah, so take his first pillar, which is emotion. He defines it as the spice of life, but he illustrates it with things like the swaying of willows or the graceful bending of bamboo.
And the melodious singing of birds. He links the internal human experience like a tender gaze shared under the moonlight directly with the physical ripples of a babbling stream.
It's so poetic.
It really is.
Yeah.
He's basically establishing a vitalist worldview here. The argument is that human sentiment isn't just a byproduct of consciousness that separates us from nature.
It's the exact same kinetic energy that causes a willow tree to sway in the wind.
Exactly. Emotion is the literal movement of life, which logically necessitates his second pillar, love. If emotion is the movement, love is the mechanism of resonance.
Right. He defines love as the dance of emotions among entities that attract and harmonize with each other.
Yeah, and he illustrates that through imagery of nourishment and sustainability. So flowers exuding fragrance, heavy fruits hanging on branches, cows calmly nursing their young.
So love, in his framework, isn't just a feeling of affection. It's the gravitational pull that ensures life continues and sustains itself. It's the architecture of connection.
Precisely. Emotion initiates the movement, love sustains the connection. But then we arrive at the third pillar, which is really where his philosophy becomes intensely radical.
Oh yeah, the third pillar is sex, or nature.
Right. He identifies sex as the absolute, irreducible essence of life itself. He asserts that all things and all phenomena are just expressions and blossoms of sex.
And he's fundamentally redefining the term here, which is fascinating. He isn't just talking about biological reproduction.
Not at all.
He describes sex as Towering mountains, rushing rivers, valleys emerging from the mist, fluttering butterflies. If a rushing river is an expression of sex, he's clearly using the word to mean the raw, volatile, generative engine of existence.
He is basically equating the primal driving force of the physical cosmos with sexual energy. It's that unbridled vitality that forces matter to organize and erupt and multiply.
It's wild to think about it that way.
It is. And to complete this whole framework, he introduces the fourth pillar, which is beauty or color.
The outward expression.
Yeah, exactly. It's the visible manifestation of that internal vital engine. The rainbow arching over the mountains, parrots, coral reefs, the multicolored sparkle of diamonds.
Beauty is the sensory evidence that the other three pillars are functioning properly.
Right.
So if we synthesize these four pillars, it radically alters how we view the physical world. It's as if traditional philosophy often views the physical world as an illusion or distraction from the true spiritual reality.
Something you have to look past.
Exactly. But the author is saying this physical sensory IMAX experience is the main feature. If you take away the emotion, the resonance of love, that primal generative drive, and the brilliant colors, you don't achieve a state of holy purity.
No, not in his view.
You're just left with a blank, unplugged screen.
That's a great analogy. The author explicitly states that without these four elements, the world isn't pure. It's barren, lifeless, cold, and just entirely dead.
Which brings us to a really critical philosophical junction.
Right. If we accept his premise that reality is constructed entirely of these four vibrant forces, what happens when human beings actively try to suppress them?
Especially since he considers humans to be the ultimate essence of nature.
Exactly. What happens when we deny our very core?
Well, he argues that it leads to a state of absolute psychological and spiritual decay. He asks this rhetorical question. Without emotion, love, sex, and beauty, would nature still be nature?
And his conclusion is that it wouldn't. It would become a gathering of demons.
He literally says it would be hell, and he breaks down the mechanics of this degradation, pillar by pillar.
The author is highly systematic in his diagnosis of self-denial here. If you amputate emotion, you halt the movement of life within yourself. He argues a person becomes unfeeling and cold.
Expressionless.
Yeah, he uses the metaphor of a mummy. It's a striking image of something that retains the shape of a human but has been intentionally drained of all its internal vitality.
Wow. It's just a preserved husk. And if you deny love, which again he defined earlier as the resonance and connection between things, he says a person becomes greedy, selfish, jealous, and combative.
Right. He compares this state to being a demon.
Which makes logical sense within his specific framework. Because without the gravitational pull of love connecting you to the rest of the ecosystem, you're just reduced to an isolated paranoid ego fighting entirely for its own survival.
That's spot on. Then he analyzes the denial of sex, which he sees as the fundamental engine of vitality. He argues that suppressing this drive destroys a person's ability to distinguish yin from yang,
Right.
or right from wrong, or even fragrance from stench, making them, quote, useless and without offspring.
Okay, I have to jump in and push back on that specifically.
Sure.
So what does this all mean? Why would suppressing a physical drive destroy your moral compass or your basic perception of right and wrong? That seems like an enormous leap.
Well, it is a leap if you view sex purely as a biological function. But remember, in his ontology, sex is the underlying cosmological physics of polarity.
The interaction of opposing forces.
Yes. It's the interaction that generates reality. If you forcefully shut down your connection to that primal engine, you numb your sensitivity to the basic dualities and rhythms of the universe.
Oh, I see.
You become blind to the fundamental mechanics of how love operates. Finally, he states that denying beauty or color leaves a person's face like dead ash.
He brutally characterizes a life without beauty as worse than dung.
It's intense.
This intense condemnation of self-restraint is really jarring. I mean, the author is so intensely against self-denial, but isn't self-restraint usually seen as a virtue in almost every major philosophical and religious tradition?
Absolutely.
Why is he taking such an extreme, almost combative stance against it?
Well, Suething isn't just arguing against strict asceticism. He considers the very goal of transcending the physical world to be an ontological error. He views it as actively destructive to the fabric of reality itself.
And this leads him to build a highly controversial case, taking direct aim at specific religious practices that preach detachment. He specifically targets certain interpretations of Buddhism.
He does, and I think it's important to state here that we are just carefully outlining his critique.
Yes, absolutely. We want to explicitly remind you, the listener, that we're not endorsing this view or taking sides on Buddhism or any religious practice. We are simply exploring the really fiery arguments presented in the original text.
Right, impartial reporting. So his argument is that the concept of transcending desires to reach a pure state is logically flawed. He essentially asks, without emotion, love, sex, and beauty, what is the point of reaching the Elysium world?
Right. If you transcend desires to reach paradise, what is paradise without the very things that make life joyous?
Exactly. He's pointing out what he sees as a structural paradox. How can bliss possibly exist without the very mechanics that generate joy? He argues that attempting to transcend these things is actually an affront to Buddha.
He also aggressively targets the common ascetic belief that engaging in sexual acts or deep emotional attachments drains a person's spiritual or physical energy.
Oh, his refutation of this is so blunt.
It's hilarious, actually. He uses this humorous, blunt comparison, stating that he's never heard of energy flowing into sewage pipes or being depleted in a toilet.
He's using that crude imagery intentionally, I think, to strip away the mystical aura surrounding ascetic rules. He completely rejects the premise that physical union inherently depletes your vital force.
And he really escalates this rhetoric when describing what enlightenment looks like, if it is devoid of these four pillars.
The language gets strikingly graphic here.
Yeah, he doesn't just call it incorrect. He compares this kind of sterile enlightenment to dog feces, horse urine, scabs, and filthy, sticky pus.
It's highly calculated shock value. He wants the reader to feel visceral revulsion toward the ideal of a sterile, disconnected spirituality.
But he anchors this in a bold theological claim. He states that Buddha himself embodies sex.
Right. Because if sex is the fundamental essence of all life and phenomena, the divine cannot be separate from it.
The divine must encompass the generative engine of reality.
Which leads to his ultimate conclusion on transcendence, which is that it's impossible. He argues that without the primal force of sex, you wouldn't even exist to attempt transcendence.
Because it would mean ceasing to exist entirely.
Exactly. Distancing yourself from these pillars doesn't create purity. It just creates desolate wastelands and howling ghosts.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because this raises a massive red flag for me.
I can guess what it is.
If the author believes transcending these primal urges is essentially spiritual suicide, how does he suggest we actually engage with them? Is he just advocating for pure, unbridled hedonism?
That is the exact trap that a surface-level reading of Xifeng's essay invites. It sounds like a mandate to just surrender completely to your base desires.
Right, what stops someone from just chasing dopamine all day?
And this is exactly why the supplementary commentary by Fan Celestial is so critical to this deep dive. The commentary provides the psychological and spiritual mechanics required to actually live this out without descending into total chaos.
Yes, Fan Celestial acknowledges that the original essay brilliantly removes the mental constraints that bind human nature. But then they introduce a really vital distinction.
It's a crucial pivot. The issue at hand isn't whether you engage in emotion, love, sex, and beauty. The physical acts themselves are neutral.
It's all about how you engage with them.
Exactly. It's a matter of spiritual quality. It comes down to the quality of your consciousness while you are experiencing these things.
So how does Fan Celestial explain that shift?
They articulate a necessary transition from what is called mundane attachment to celestial freedom.
Mundane to celestial.
Right. A spiritually perfect person doesn't cling to or get trapped by these elements. The commentator agrees with Xifeng that you shouldn't try to transcend these forces because that's impossible. But the goal is to elevate or sublimate them.
So instead of transcending, you elevate. How do you actually elevate a physical desire or an intense emotion?
It requires a profound shift in cognitive focus. Fan Celestial explains that you must face all the activities of the senses. Everything the eyes see, the ears hear, the nose smells, the tongue tastes, the body feels, and the mind thinks.
Basically all sensory input.
Yes. You face it all with a detached or naturally free heart, ultimately achieving a state of non-action where nothing is left undone.
It sounds like riding a powerful wave, honestly.
That's a great way to put it.
Like traditional asceticism says stay out of the ocean entirely so you don't drown. And unbridled hedonism is just sort of thrashing around in the water, letting the currents bash you against the rocks.
Yeah, completely out of control.
But this commentary is suggesting you learn to surf. You engage completely with the immense power of nature, but with a perfectly balanced, unattached mind.
That analogy perfectly captures the Taoist concept of wu wei, or non-action, which the commentator is referencing here. You're fully immersed in the sensory data, but your ego isn't attempting to capture, possess, or hoard the experience.
You feel the joy, but you don't anxiously grasp at it when the moment naturally fades.
Exactly. And finally, Fey and Celestial addresses the whole energy-draining debate again, but through this new psychological lens.
Right, because so Feng joked about energy not going down the toilet, dismissing the biological argument. But Fey and Celestial provides the psychological explanation.
Yes. The commentator argues that energy loss isn't caused by the physical acts themselves. The actual leak of energy is dictated by where the mind and consciousness are anxiously focused.
So obsessing over a past pleasure or fearing the loss of a current lover, that psychological grasping is what exhausts the spirit.
Precisely. The friction of the ego trying to control nature is what burns you out. But if your spirit is elevated and free, you can engage with the raw power of the physical world without losing your vitality.
It's a complete redefinition of spiritual discipline. We've charted such a wild journey on this deep dive today.
You really
I
are.
mean, we went from defining the universe through the vibrant sensory pillars of emotion, love, sex, and beauty, then through a fiery, intense critique of spiritual self-denial.
All the way to the nuanced conclusion that true awakening means elevating our earthly experiences rather than trying to escape them entirely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this text really offers a radical permission slip.
Oh, absolutely.
It suggests that your daily sensory joys, enjoying a beautiful sunset, feeling deep emotions, savoring romance, they aren't distractions from your spiritual path. They are the path, provided you engage with them freely and without obsessive attachment.
It demands that we stop viewing our humanity as a burden. So I want to leave you with a final lingering question to ponder on your own.
If spiritual perfection is judged not by what you strictly abstain from, but by how deeply and freely you engage with the physical world around you, what does a truly spiritual day look like for you tomorrow? Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll see you on the next one.